Morning, Ross. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can, Ross. That's great. How you going?
Good, thanks. It looks like it must be cold down there, is it?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I'm farm sitting near Braidwood, between Canberra and the coast, and up in the sort of southern tablelands, and it's sort of like, it'd only be -2 or something this morning, but the house loses its heat overnight. So, yeah.
We think it's cold here when we've got about 12 degrees.
Yeah, for sure. Time to fly north if it gets down to 12. So, what was I going to say? I put a video up. Did you see that? Shifting the cows?
Oh, no, I haven't. Whereabouts is that on?
Yeah. I shared it on the Regrarians Facebook, I reckon. But it froze. Here he is. It was incredibly cold. So I could.
You should be able to access that on the website, the Regrarians website, is it?
No, it should be on the Regrarians Facebook. I think I stuck it, but I can send a link to you anyway if you don't find it.
Yep.
But yeah, so I'm farm sitting sort of 400 calving cows sort of thing, and the guy's going really well. So Peter and Anya are going very well. How are you going, Darren? Are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, very well.
Good. How about that?
Almost as though the technology's working.
I know. What sort of internet have they got out at Araluen? We want some.
Oh, Sky must have it. It's not usually. Yeah. I had one with a link up with the States yesterday, and that kept dropping out. It's just hopeless, and that was on Zoom. So
yeah,
which I find is more stable than nearly anything else.
Yeah, so. But even so, yeah, right. Oh well, we should count our blessings and get on with things. Get in while the going's good.
Yeah. So, if you got any grass up there, Ross, or is that?
No, it's been pretty dry, and the cows are looking pretty sad at the moment.
Yeah, it's pretty tough, isn't it? So, that's it.
So, Ross, did you quantify to buy feed, or in your decision making as to not to destock, or how did you go with that decision?
Yeah, no, we haven't destocked. We've because we still got a fair bit of, we're just about running out of hay now.
Yeah.
From our stock, yeah. So we might have to buy in a bit.
Yeah. Because I think we would have talked about that decision a bit earlier on, Graham, I suppose, about the cost of feeding versus the destocking scenario. But I suppose a lot of people would have already destocked, so prices would have dropped a fair bit, I suppose, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they have, and
feed prices,
and it's sort of on the increase, especially in this area. I was just going back through your questions, Ross. So,
one of the things that we struggle with, I guess, is that because we want to be right away from chemicals and all that sort of stuff. So when we originally bought a lot of the cattle, they were from an organic place.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, you pay premium for it, but then the market doesn't recognise that when you're selling it. So you sort of got to go, if you sell, then how do you restock again? And you're losing even more money because you've got to pay premium again.
Yeah.
So there's no advantage therefore, Ross, to buying, say, certified or cattle from a certified organic source. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, well, I'm just saying that, well, up here, it just seems difficult to access organic because the works, like when you send them into the works, they don't recognise it. I mean, not here. You'd have to send them to one that's recognised, and then you're paying extra transport to get it to a place.
Yeah. But I'm saying that if you buy normal stock, so you buy some 6-month-old calves and then you run them through the system, and you run them through for, let's say, until they're 2 years old, can you then sell them as organic if your property's certified organic, or do they have to start off as certified organic calves?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. The thing is, we're not actually certified ourselves.
Right.
We're only just working on the principle of, you know, don't use chemicals, and looking into a lot of that stuff around certification. I don't really, you know, I guess there's a lot of theories around how that is just it's not efficient. That you're better off creating a brand name for yourself and just
I would tend to agree, especially when you're a small scale grower. I mean, organic certification is really set up for commodity sales, not for if you're direct marketing. I don't see any advantage whatsoever in having certification.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a point where you actually don't know everyone that you're marketing to.
Yeah,
that the organic certification comes in, but before that, it's really they're doing it on trust, and you can say that this is what I do. He's using an older version of Zoom, Celia. Yeah. Tassie version. I'll just try and get you. Yeah, no, it won't allow you to talk. But unless I promote Celia to a panelist.
That's what I always do for Celia. Have done for years now.
Oh, she's gone, I think. Oh, no, there she is.
Just getting out of bed.
Crazy.
Remember, it doesn't get light where she is until 10 o'clock. So.
For it. Yeah.
And the sun comes over. So, well, good morning. Well, we might get started, hey, and then go through the Q&A. Is there any questions that people would like to get off their chest now, so that as I'm going, I'll cover off on them?
Graham, just technical matter. Can you just check the bottom panel and make sure that all the recording stuff's on? So I think where it says more, just click on that. And it says up here. Actually, no, it says on my thing it's recording, so it's all good.
Yeah.
So all you have to do at the end is just press leave meeting or end meeting, and then it'll be good.
Fantastic.
All things being equal, it all should work. If it doesn't, well, it'll just be a wonderful memory that this group of 5 will have.
Gives you a nice warm feeling, but
yeah, something like that. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
And I'll share that screen. Pedaling. All right.
Can you yell it louder?
This isn't going so well. I'll just be a sec. I'm not sure why it's not sharing. I'll just try and swap screens. I've lost everything.
It was sharing, and then it. I can see what you've got on the screen, Graham. So.
Yeah. Where's it hiding from me?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So if I do that, so you're...
Yeah, we still see your screen. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's not popping up for me. So will I run it just not in a presentation mode,
Yeah,
just like that? Is that okay?
That'll be fine.
Okay.
One of the things that you can do there is, I think that's big enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I'll get going. So this is sort of Unit 3 Q&A, and I was just trying to sort of set the scene to catch up again after our little break. Where are we up to? So the Unit 1. So are you profitable, and where do you need to go, and what are the blockages? And then we talked about, do you need new income, and where do you need to focus your time and money on the weak link? And then Unit 3 was about that reducing the maintenance expenses and paying yourself first. And that's a real key breakthrough from Alan, in that, if we just run normally, what we do is we let our expenses rise up and take all the income. So we spoke of examples of that. So that's that Unit 3 paying that. And just quickly, sort of, I'm still seeing this. I've been doing a fair bit of this work at the moment, and it's sort of, the bookkeeping is a real big logjam for people. Easily and comfortably being able to, on a monthly basis, get your numbers and see whether it's going. If people start to do that, a lot of they start to revisit the weak link and start going back through the budget and stuff. So it's like one of those continuous improvement type things. So people being able to stop and have time to plan, and then having those monthly meetings where you actually put the plan back on track. And then some of the other big log jams of sort of, do they have enough infrastructure, and are we falling into patterns? So I think we need to make sure that as a first step, we can see the sky, Celia. As a first step, we can start to do that bookkeeping and getting that variance to budget. And usually within the first week of the month. As soon as that month finishes, you're into getting that variance to budget. Once you've got that variance to budget, I say put it away for at least a day. Put it away for at least a day, and then come back and have a management meeting, not a bookkeeper meeting. So if you're in bookkeeper mode, you almost need a break. Take that hat off and put the other hat on. So and then we did this. What's the profit target? This is from work Mark Gardner did on sort of just a simple profit target. What do you want to do? So that what I find a lot on farms is that the farms act like a black hole. They take all the money. It's almost as though the money spins down into the farm, and it gets over the event horizon. So we've got to make sure that we're making positive and definite decisions on where do we want the money to go. And also, I'm finding that a lot of the time people are trying to lower their risk by having other income streams, but they're linking them all to rainfall. So if you're going to lower your risk, you can't have cropping and sheep. You've got to have sheep and maybe something not linked to rainfall, or not linked to sort of that whole farming thing. So we have to think about how do we actually lower that sort of thing, and then that longer term savings for super and stuff. I'm staying on a farm in southern New South Wales at a place called Araluen, and it's in desperate drought around here, and people are feeding every day, and cattle all over the roads, and putting them out every day, sort of trying to keep them alive at the moment, and sort of I'm moving 400 cows and calves that have got sort of 3 or 4 months worth of grass in front of them. So, and yesterday the neighbour helped me out by letting them out of a paddock for me. So, but I kept calm. Celia, you'll like this. I kept calm, and I went and thanked her for shifting them for me.
Very evolved. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very patient. So, yeah, and then we need to do these gross margins or gross profits, as Alan would say. So this is just thinking about each enterprise and preparing a sheet. The ones we've had a look at are the, so this is sort of everyone's sort of what's the income, what's the profit, what's the expenses for that business. So this doesn't include time for wages, doesn't include that. It's a real stripped down version, and they do have real faults on them, in that they don't cover off on all the interest costs and all that sort of thing. But it is just the gross margin. It's the variable costs. You've got to pay yourself anyway, so that's why that doesn't appear in there. So what Alan says is if you strip out those costs that you can't change, the fixed costs, you can see which one's adding to the business. Whereas a lot of that sort of higher risk enterprises will actually come out as not being high enough in profit. And then we did the financial weak link, and people have been doing that. So, you know, what's the weak link between sunlight and dollars? I'm just going to try and swap that over to here, just so I don't have to keep doing that. New share. Just so I don't have to keep swinging around. It won't be a sec. How's that? Is that back for you?
Yep.
So, yeah, and this was an organic dairy example, but people have been doing that. And the idea is if you address the weak link, you will get more money out of the business, and you'll get money out of the business in the short term. So with the organic dairy, they had lots of issues. So, you know, they were exhausted from milking too long, and the vat was too small, and, you know, they were locked into a factory. But if you get all those out, to get more money out of the business, they had to lower their feed costs. You know, I was stressing because they had low landscape function, and I'm putting together an article for the Stipend newsletter on which grazing, what type of grazing leads to increasing landscape function. They needed lots of fertilizer, so they're making compost, and they were exhausted from that. And you know, the pastures weren't lasting, cows weren't healthy. So they had a whole heap of things, but it was the feed costs that once we started focusing on that, the business became healthier, because then they had to lower the costs by increasing the amount of grass they were eating. A lot of it was adjusting the stocking rate. They were overstocked for the cost of the milk price at the moment. So that milk price and the seasonal outlook determines the stocking rate, whereas dairy farmers tend to pick a stocking rate and stick to that, and it just doesn't work. So yeah, so anyway, we won't go on to that, but I think everyone started to get a feel for that. I'm not always sure that we intuitively jump to the right things. So feel free to keep sending them to me on where you're up to on sort of what you think the weak link is, but give me all the sort of problems and issues that you have, and we can go through them. Because otherwise, sort of, I have this thing that when you're in the business, it's very hard to see, but it's easier to see for someone outside. So I send our financial weak link material like this to Mark Gardner to look at, and because he can see it as soon as he looks at it. Whereas when you're in the business, if you could see it, you would fix it. So it's actually almost hides itself from ourselves. So, yeah, but yeah, it can be a valuable exercise. So yeah, so if we can do that, and if you wanted to keep sending, that'd be great. So where we're up to, we've done that profit planned and paying yourself first. So that was what we were onto. So that paying yourself first, we've determined the weak link in each enterprise, and now we're looking at planning the profit and paying yourself first. So this is this whole thing to stop expenses rising to anticipated profit. So you take the profit out and put it aside so that you actually know that it's there. You know, for some people that may mean putting it in a different bank account on the first of the month and taking that profit like it's a wage. So how do you actually make sure that you're putting that profit aside and it's not being frittered away on the expenses of the business? Because agriculture is really good at making sure that we spend the money, but also then we don't achieve that anticipated income. When I was working for a salary, you knew that the anticipated income was going to come in. And so you could afford to let the expenses rise to a significant share of it because you always knew. Whereas in agriculture, the income can drop by 50% on any 1 year. So how do we make sure that we don't have a crash on that? So is that going okay? Is that clear?
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. So I'm struggling to remember whether we did the wealth inescapable and maintenance, but I'll do it now, and then we can do that. We did, because here we were talking about reducing the maintenance expenses. So what we do is Alan has come up with a way of categorizing the expenses. So, and calling everything, really all the expenses, maintenance expenses, apart from the wealth generating expenses, which will address the weak link, all of them as maintenance. And there's something about that word maintenance that allows us then to go back and rethink it and readdress it. So this is a really powerful mental thinking tool. So any expense that's going to address the weak link and result in more income. So it's at least sort of every dollar you spend in a wealth generating, it's going to produce $2 back into the business, at least $2 back, hopefully more. A lot of agriculture budgeting, you know, you spend $1 and you make $1.10 back, and that's just not enough. It's got to make another dollar back. So spend $1, it makes $2 back. So and then there's the inescapable, and the inescapable are usually that morally or legally obliged to pay. So if you had a family loan, that might be the morally part that you feel that you must pay that. Some of those other things that we have to do is, you know, the rates. See, I used to put bank interest in there as an inescapable, but the bankers don't put it in when and that they don't feel morally or legally obliged to pay anything, do they, those bankers? So, yeah, if we have a kick at them on the way through each time, I think that's a good idea. But I was training some rural bankers, and they didn't put their interest in as inescapable because they saw it as always negotiable. So if something's negotiable and you're not morally or legally obliged to do it, then it falls into the maintenance expense. So the bankers put theirs in. But people tend to pay their bank before they feed themselves, which I think is really interesting. So there's only a few, maybe one or two of the expenses that you're going to prioritise into inescapable. Everything else goes into the maintenance pool. And then and they're essential. They're like the insurance and phone and wages and electricity, all those into maintenance, and then that allows us to address them. So, and then we can go back and spend a day sort of, what people do is they actually go and do that hard work on reducing those maintenance expenses. So can they redesign it so that they don't need them? Can they go for lower cost? Can they substitute it with something else? Can they look at being more efficient or eliminate it completely? So, so people go back and spending a day redoing their insurance and saving $1,000 on the day. On the insurance. So it's a pretty good day. Then if you save any of that maintenance expenses and spending it on the wealth generating expenses makes more money, you can check that shifting those savings to the wealth expenses actually increases the business profit, the whole of business profit or money at bank, as I've been saying. So that's where I believe we're up to. But if I'm wrong, I'm really happy to sort of go back and correct that. So I'm assuming we're nearly ready to put a plan. Yeah, it might be rough as, but it'll be a plan, and it'll be a monthly plan of what's the income and what's the expenses and how we're going to address that weak link. So is that where you feel like you're up to, Celia, or you're still in the design mode?
Well, yeah, I just had a major reshift as far as enterprises. I mean, we've been talking around the pastured chicken thing because the hatchery hasn't supplied the hens that I've actually been caught with very little income. So, and looking at the size of the farm, that's really the only possibility, besides going back to either rural journalism or doing more consultancy work with the permaculture. Yeah, so that's actually naturally evolved, and the accommodation side of things, that is sort of a longer term plan, as in we've got amazing views here to actually invest in a tiny house as a retirement plan as well for me, to actually rent it out in the meantime and move into it as I get older and this hill gets to so yeah, that's sort of a longer term thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So for this year, what are the enterprises? Have you selected the enterprises for this financial year?
Yeah, well, it would be the
Or
pasture hens because I've got 150 of them, but the other 450 aren't going to be on track till February now.
Right.
Through Bungle. So yeah, that and the consultancy.
Okay.
Getting some work off farm. It's yeah, throwing my hands in the air a bit at the moment. I really don't know. Yeah, I'm just feeling a bit peeved with the whole thing. Years of work and it's just gone pear-shaped because one, incompetent person outside my control, and I didn't have a backup plan. But I mean, I actually realised I could have had one in this situation, that I think I just can't afford to buy point of lay hens when there's only one hatchery in the state to rely on, and we can't obviously fly in 600 point of lays. So I actually need to rear my own, which means putting in more infrastructure to actually. I reared them in my shed once, and it just trashes your shed, and I'm not prepared to do that again. It was in summer workshop, so yeah.
Why can't you fly them in? Is it like
it's just cost
not
prohibitive?
allowed? Oh, okay.
Yeah, even though you can buy point of lay hens over there for $12 and we pay $20 to $25 here.
All right.
You physically can't get them in. They've got to come as pets. Short of me going over and getting them, which, yeah, I mean, it is a possibility, I guess, but it's in northern New South. Breed
Have you seen many other people's brooding setups at all, Celia, for your sort of scale operation?
Yes, well, just through the Australian Pasture Poultry page.
Oh, good. Yeah, good. Because I was going to say that's probably a good spot to be in, because there's quite a few people in your scale there.
Yes, yeah, and everyone's really generous with their sharing of their experience. I mean, I have done it several times before, and it's doable, but I just don't want to do it in my workshop again, because it just
takes up that space. Yeah, I know it's quite especially if you need. How many are you going to be needing?
Well, the figures say 600's the profitable, the economies of scale.
Yeah, that's a lot. That takes up a fair bit of space then, especially if you're doing layers. So
Yeah, and the mess is diabolical that they dust that they generate. It's like talcum powder over everything in the workshop, and it's. But also,
well, you need to allocate it its own space. Yeah, I get that.
Definitely, yeah. And I've actually got a design for it. It's just physically being able to do it, and because it's just mud sitting all down, not mud. Water sitting all over the hills at the moment.
Yeah.
So we've just had another rain
Bruce Burton is doing outdoor brooding, which is interesting, and there's not many people who are doing outdoor, but Bruce has built some beautiful buildings for that, which are, and so has, what's his name? Leanne and Dan Cordner as well. They've sort of followed Bruce's lead as well. But they're up in the tropics, so their temperatures aren't as great. But Bruce's temperatures will be similar to yours.
Yeah. So is that the A-frames, Darren?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, A-frame. But I mean, Bruce spent an arm and a leg on those things. I suggested to him that kind of structure, and then I turned up one day and he's got these things that most people wouldn't even spend as much on their house, you know. They're really beautiful. I said, "What's the payoff on these, Bruce? Are these part of the asset value of your property, or have you included these as part of the business?" And I think it was the
Well, I visited him last winter, and they were just stunning. It was and it's just.
But
I mean,
I look at that structure. I mean, that same structure could be constructed out of wood, and you know, you could do that structure on what I might say a cheaper version.
Yes.
But that might be a solution for you in one way, to do an outdoor structure, but it's still an expense.
Yes, I have actually looked at solar and whatnot to be able to, because our flat areas aren't near the house. So, they're quite a distance, and we can't actually get electricity to them without significant cost.
And what about gas?
Yeah, I hadn't thought. Yeah.
Well, gas for your heaters. That's all. Because you can use bottled gas to do that, and that's probably easily transportable. But it might be a way to go. I mean, you're going to have to do something, aren't you? So
yes. And I really enjoy the chickens, and the figures do add up. It's, and on 15 acres, there's very little else you can do, because I'm not going back to market gardening.
Well, you could build. I imagine you could build a pretty simple A-frame out of some pine or whatever's, and just some. It doesn't have to be brand new steel, and some sort of slat. I mean, Bruce has gone to the nth degree.
Yes.
A version of something similar would be great. With bottled gas for your brooder, and then because the one thing that's happened as a result of that, of course, those animals, because they're outdoors immediately, their foraging rates have increased above what they would have otherwise. So,
well, I noticed these 150 pointed lays that I had were actually reared in a shed. It's the first time I've bought pointed lays, and they're totally feral. They're so agoraphobic, and
exactly.
And they're total freaks. Yeah,
no, that's right.
Yeah,
well, they're all. Well, they start off as orphans. It's if I buy a bunch of calves that have been or lambs that have been separated from their mothers straight away, they've got absolutely no idea how to be a calf. They don't know what to eat. They don't know. It's the same with chooks. You take them, but you get those little house chooks that have been, reared under their mother. Yeah. They come out like little street fighters, and their foraging rates are incredible. I mean, they're really, really tough little buggers,
Yes.
So, anyway, I wrote that article a while ago. How to breed? Why don't we breed chooks like cows? Because there is this separation that occurs with chicken production. No one does hen brooding anymore.
No.
And I think that, like, it really struck me when I talked to Michael Sommerlads about this, and and he was saying that they were breeding broodiness out of their chickens.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like, it's kind of like what's happened with the livestock industry, Graham, where we're not rewarding sexual dimorphism anymore, and as a result, we're wondering why fertility rates are going down. You know, it's like,
yeah, it is. So the bulls look like steers and the cows look like steers. So it's
yeah,
real.
yeah. So it's a similar thing with other forms of livestock, and I think that ultimately that's problematic and inefficient. But anyway, so yeah. Anyway, I'll get back to my box.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, Celia, I need a plan from you though.
Right.
Yeah, so that was really interesting.
but
I want to know what the monthly income's going to be. If you're not going to get those sort of chickens till Feb, what does that mean to the whole thing? So I'd really like to see you put it on an Excel spreadsheet by heading by month, and then what your best estimate is of the consultancy from the permaculture, and also from the 250. I know that's really mentally hard when you're pretty sure that it's not going to make money, but we then need to look at that and then say, well, what are we going to do now? And that'll be that sort of rejigging it again and redoing and cycling again back through that, back to, do we go back to that sort of, do we need, why won't it come back to me? Come back here. That new sources of income. So that's step 4, and that's what it's feeling like to me. I don't think you're going to be building a brooder and doing all those things in the short term. So what's the impact from the 1st of July through to when you can do those things, or when you get those hens in Feb, and what's the lag then to getting that? Yeah, I'm sure you're all over it with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it should be easier, I keep saying. Yeah. Mum said if I worked hard at school, I wouldn't have to worry about stuff like this. So, and she lied. So, So, is that okay, Celia? If we move on from there, I'll go to Ross. Can you hear me, Ross? And
Yep, I can hear you.
yeah. So where are you up to, Ross? Do you feel like you're going to have a plan? I've got financial worksheet for the mangoes and the cattle and some of that dollars per hour and things. So I'm just opening that as we speak. But where do you feel like you're up to with you're getting a profitable budget in place? So
well, it's at the moment, I guess we've got a few things going. So the mangoes, I'm working with Region Ag at the moment, making up biofertilizers and trying to get them out to try and improve the mango production. And I know last time we were talking about making hay, and I think you guys were saying how we should look into whether that's a profitable thing or whether we should rethink making the hay. At the moment, we're still probably looking at, because that's the way the farm is set up, it is, we're still looking at doing the hay.
So that was irrigated hay, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the thing is, see, our pump has broken down, and we're just in the process of re-getting that fixed up. But we're just like kicking ourselves, spewing, because at the moment, because of it's been quite dry this winter, summer and winter, and everybody is wanting feed. So he'll be like, we could have been producing and making some good money.
Yeah. Could you Ross, can you see that's your cattle financial week link one? Has that come up on the screen?
Yep.
What I'd like to see is one of those for the hay. So, and then a few numbers around it. Do you know, like that like I was showing in the PowerPoint? I'll take that away again and try. And then some of that sort of gross margin type stuff. So a sheet like that. So what is the income? You know, when does it happen? What's the income? What's the profit? What are the expenses? So a financial week link and a gross margin sheet for that hay enterprise. Because at the moment, I just have a feel that unless you're going to be doing it for the future, that the pump might be more than what the profit is. So it mightn't produce any profit this year. And then if it doesn't, we can then talk about, well, is it still worthwhile doing? And we'll check whether it's in context for you in the long run. So is that all right if you could do that?
Yeah. And I guess, like you said before, it's not going to be an accurate thing because it's just going to be a figure, an estimate of what we are hoping to expect to get out of it. And the other thing is, I mean, we've already committed to buying the pump, so I mean that's already in the pipeline and already.
Well, I think that's a really good thing. So you know what that expense is going to be, and it's going to be locked in. Will you be able to grow something before if you get spring rain and you get spring growth? I'm not holding my breath that that's what you are going to get up in your area, but if you did, then the forage cost would drop, the hay cost would drop. So we'd need to see a gross margin that it stays dry, and a gross margin that you do get a good early spring rain, and all the grasses kick off. So you got the boundaries is really what I'm trying to say. So stays dry, the feed's going to be about the same as what it is now. If it rains, it's probably going to come off, I don't know what it'd come off. It'd come off 30% probably. So, just say that you've got that in your head so that you go, well, if it rains, then what does that mean? Do I stop now? But will you be able to grow anything between getting the pump and the growing season?
Yeah, well, it's actually now, right this month is when we should be planting lucerne is supposed to be planted now.
Right.
So hopefully we're going to try and get into the end of this. Yeah, well, the pump's supposed to be going in next week, and then we're going to straight away. We're actually preparing the pasture now.
Yeah. So, and the decision to use lucerne, is that sort of what everyone does, or what was driving that?
Yeah, that's the main thing here is and I guess there's the demand. It's like everybody, and I know we've talked to a lot of other people there's some other hay farmers who go, they could see more benefit in oats or barley, and like you can get the grain off that and then get the forage from that and make hay out of that, and how it's actually more beneficial. But people here have been basically conditioned to believe that lucerne is the best and everyone wants lucerne.
Yeah. Oh, I understand. Yeah. I was just thinking, like for other options, maybe lower risk options and better for the environment than lucerne. So, like the first thought that popped into my head was, like a multi-species forage crop, but then you'd almost need to be grazing it or harvesting it or selling it as a standing crop or whatever. So I'm just trying to get a slide up. So this is some work that Cole Seiss and I did in Victoria, and he's gone now away from lucerne and is more using his multi-species forage, but just I'm not sure that's the right thing for you to do. But I was just thinking, because what we really need is that look of that 100% ground cover. That's one of Gabe Brown's photos from North Dakota, and he's got that single disc with press wheels, and he plants into that sort of mulch so that the ground's covered. And that's not possible to do with lucerne, so it tends to degrade the soil and leak nitrates into the water table. And
so is that that's a no-till seeder, is it, that thing that you got?
So he does that, but he only does Gabe's really clear that it only makes money planting multi-species cover crops if you're cash cropping, because he primes the soil so that he can grow his corn without putting nitrogen fertilizer out. So he gets a grazing off it. So he grazes these real high carbon things to get that ground cover and do all that sort of work. And then he uses the design of the cover crop to prime the soil so that he's got enough nitrogen available to grow corn. So he saves all that money, plus he makes money out of it. He's sort of got a direct marketing. So Gabe and Paul Brown and the family have got a direct marketing business. So they actually make very high returns, much higher than most people. And I think that that's a real key issue, sort of how do you make money if you're going to go to cover crops rather than lucerne hay or even oats or whatever. How do you actually make money out of it and make sure that you've got the ground covered, like that photo? So so it's the photo's not about the machine. The photo's about the ground cover is sort of what I'd like to say. So
right, yep. And I agree. I do like the idea of regenerating the ground is what we're all about. We want to regenerate, and I know, lucerne is just like taking and putting nothing back. So ground cover and multi-species, we've thought about that, but like you said, it's like, how do you actually make a profit from it? I mean, we've got cattle out there, and whether you graze your own cattle and use it as a fattening, like fatten them up, or I don't know.
Yeah. But so it'd be, the other thing I really worry about is your travel time and things like that. To fatten cattle out there on those sort of things, it's a high job. It's a lot of work. What Gabe does is he uses those bat latches. So this is where an electric fence was. It has a timer on the gate. And the gate pops open, and then the animals move at this ultra high stock density. I'm not sure I've got another photo in this presentation of that, but he's using sort of lots of infrastructure. Oh yeah, there it is. So he's using this sort of design, but that's without the bat latches on. So that and then we have this sort of design. This is what Stephanie, the Masters of Ag student, made for me, which was really nice of us. So this is how we graze. We have them in strips with water at one end, and then they go up the strip and then back again. But so we can get that ultra high stock density. I thought that was pretty cute with the cows. So I'd be thinking about sort of, you might have to do the lucerne, but let's make sure that it's going to be profitable to do the lucerne, and that there's not other options that would actually have the opportunity of regenerating the land, because we're pretty confident that we can do this with cover crops. And you might design a hybrid that you've got lucerne, but then you put a summer cover crop through it. So is it a winter active or a summer active lucerne, Ross?
It actually, I don't know enough about it. We're only just going by what was already previously done there before we moved in. But my guess is that I know it does seem to grow a lot more in the winter here, because that's when the summer, the grasses are more dormant and they loosen takes off a lot more when it's cooler.
Yeah. Yeah, so you might be able to do some sort of hybrid-y thing. So when you say you're getting the ground ready, are you
Just tilling it a little bit.
yeah, so it's going to be predominantly lucerne when you do it. So there might be a gap is what I'm trying to look for, a gap that you can actually put some of these multi-species forages through when the lucerne isn't highly active, so that you're actually starting to build your ground cover and your landscape function and get that multiple crop off it, but also get that land health. So if you're only going to use annual species and lucerne, then diversity is king. If you're using perennial grasses, you don't have to worry so much about the diversity, because perenniality is far better than diversity in terms of regenerating the soil health and getting that landscape function. But we can talk about that. But yeah, if you could do those, let me get rid of that one. If you could do those things, like do the weak link for the hay, and then that gross margin or gross profit, so that you're actually pulling out sort of what are all the variable costs, what's the water going to be. We might have to put the pump in over time, over the life of its thing, but it's really, well, if you've got to pay for it this year, I'd like to see it in there this year so that we can see whether you're going to do it. And then also with your travel, how many trips out there, because it'll be that design that exhausts people is what I'm finding, is that it sort of blows people up if they've got too much of that backwards and forwards and having to do a lot of stuff. So is that okay? Is there any other with the biofertilizer? Have you done a trial on the mangoes, Ross?
I'm just doing that now. So we're doing half of the trees with the biofertilizer, injecting it into the irrigation. And then we've also got a little plot that we've just planted in barley, just a small area, and we've just irrigating that with a fertigation with the biofertilizer as well, just to see how well it goes.
Ross,
okay.
With the bioferts as well, are you? It'll be probably the second batch where it'll be best for you to do that. But are you also calculating the time that it takes you to make it and source all the materials and everything as well? Because obviously, when you buy something, that's already built into the product price.
Yeah, that's it. When we first started, so we've been doing this now for probably 6 months or so, and
yeah.
That was a big time-consuming thing, sourcing all the stuff. I guess once we know now where to get it from, that's cut down a lot.
Yeah. No, it was one of the things. I introduced that whole program to Australia, and that Kim and Georgie and whatnot are using now, and it was certainly a question from the start. And it's an individual one, because again, it depends on your proximity to the sources. So, like we had some people who were struggling to get the fresh cow manure to make bioferts, for example. So, if you have to travel an hour and a half to go and get 50 litres of cow manure, that sort of starts to get a bit ridiculous once you start to put that into the mix.
Yeah, I guess we've got a lot of that on hand. So we've got...
Yeah. And I'd understand that. And rock dust and all of that sort of thing, you're no trouble with?
And no trouble getting those sort of things. The biggest difficulty was getting the brown coal, because that's like way down south.
Yeah.
It's $100 to get a ton up here.
Yeah, well, and even then, this is part of this whole trip, I suppose, is just how reliant you are on those materials. I know this is an aside, but I know that Kim and et al. They're on a real journey with it. But the original biofert mixes that people like Hyro developed didn't have brown coal in them.
Yeah.
And so again, you might want to have a look at those aspects. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time, one that you might well want to have in the workplace, seeing you have access to it in the soils section.
Well, the thing with the brown coal is that you get a whole ton, and it will last. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
need much of it anyway. So
Yeah. Anyway, cool. Just wanted to make sure, because again, it's that thing of making sure that you charge yourself for everything. Because if you're not going to buy it, well, then you got to charge it.
yeah, and the thing with the I noticed, Kim is like talks about they're upgrading or coming out with new, experimenting and coming up with new ways of doing things. So it's not just I like the concept of biodiversity and and all the different types of trying to get as many different bacterias and things
Sure.
into the system to try and improve its ability to bounce back all the time.
Yeah. No, makes sense. All right. I'm going to go in about 5 minutes, Graham. So I'll sign off now. And thanks very much, mate. Thanks to everyone.
And I'll talk to you soon, Darren.
Thanks, mate.
Bye-bye. Okie doke. So, Ross, I'd be really keen on seeing some trial work as well. Like, is there an actual financial benefit of doing the biofertilizer for the money and time? So I've done a lot of this sort of work with compost teas and biochars and stuff on our place, and where we were managing well, we got very little return for those inputs. Where we were managing badly, we got very good return. So you could actually see a difference. But but then the decision I made was, well, do I just improve my management on those areas, or do I add other things? So in that horticulture and mangoes and things like that, and those artificial situations, then I'm not sure artificial is the right word, but those situations like that horticulture, then you really do need to put some inputs in, and some of these inputs are really important. Where you're grazing and it's perennial grass, then there's very low return. So I always ask people to show me that it's worthwhile doing, because my experience was with sort of grazing and stuff, a lot of the time it wasn't. So
I agree with I wouldn't be putting it out on grazing pasture, because I guess that's an extra time that you need to, because you'd be actually having to go out there, drive around and spray it onto your pastures. Whereas like if you're already irrigating, not that much more to get it out there. I mean, yes, there's a lot of preparation, but once it's made, it's just put it into an injector and inject it into your lines.
Yeah. Yep. So have we got all the enterprises with their gross profits and things like that? So we've got the cattle, the mangoes, and the hay. So we just need a bit more work on that. Do you think you can put that together so that we could, because we really need to be kicking off pretty soon on that, putting it together and having it ready for this financial year. So
Yep.
If you need any help, just drop me an email. I'm sort of incommunicado down here in the valley, so an email works pretty well. I can generally get them, and we can go from there.
Yep. So just going back to so when you were saying how the cover multi-species cover crop, what were you meaning, like to actually would you be actually drilling that into the lucerne, so because you don't disturb the land, so you'd need to have some sort of no-till seeding system or something to
and I take your point about this machine. See, that could run through and a lot of people Coal Sice uses a knife point with a coulter in front of the knife point, but he uses a knife point to get a bit of tilth and a bit of soil disturbance, so that he can get his multi-species cover crops and pasture crops in. So he's doing that into sort of a lot of the pastures are predominantly red grass, and then he's using a machine with a coulter in front of a knife point and a press wheel behind. But he also, and this is, even though we've tried to explain it, we find it really hard. So I've been trying to change the way I talk about this. I've been saying to people, the perennial grasses and perennial plants tend to control what's going to grow beside them. And I say they've got the ball and you've got to get the ball back off them. So, and yeah, the root zones is what you've got to be thinking about. So Cole, to get his pasture crops and his multi-species covers in, he overgrazes the grasses to weaken the root reserves. So he'll come back too often, and really high utilization, which isn't necessarily a problem if you get enough recovery. So he weakens the plants. Then he goes out and uses a desiccant type herbicide to weaken the plants. And then he goes out and uses a knife point to weaken the plants and get the ball back off them. So he does this multi-step process so that the perennials will allow the annuals to grow in the system, because a healthy perennial grassland won't let the annuals grow. He's also waiting until they're frosted or slowed right down in their growth. So he's putting a winter cereal into summer grasses. So where we see it fail in southern Australia is when people are trying to put a winter cover crop mix into winter growing perennial grasses, and the perennial grasses just take out the annuals and won't let them play. So they keep all the nutrients, they keep all the water, and that's sort of one of the biggest problems. So I've even so I used to say C3 and C4. So C3 grasses grow in the winter and C4 grow in the summer. And then I went to winter grasses and summer grasses. And then I found that I've actually got to say, if you have Phalaris cocksfoot perennial ryegrass, then they're all winter ones and you can't put a winter cover crop into those. So, and that's poorly understood. I thought everyone knew what we were saying, but I think we've spent years telling people stuff that they really didn't get what we were talking about. Was that better? Was that clearer, Celia? Was that, and Ross?
It's to me, it's very complicated, and I guess also you got to consider the climate here will be different where we are, and so I don't know. Yeah, it'll be a lot of research to try and find out exactly what, and to come up with a plan, like and how to do it and what would work.
Yeah. Well, we can do that, and Cole and I have been doing that around what's it called, Emerald and things like that. So in west of Rockhampton, so we fly into Rockhampton and do that, and we go through a process with people of what are they trying to achieve, then tell us about the paddocks, tell us about the machinery, what sort of machine have you got, can you use herbicides? So like, these would be things that you weren't that'd be applicable to you, Ross, that are they organic, not accredited, or what could they do? And then we can design from that, and we do that, and then send us some photos, so across the paddock, down into the paddock. And this is the one we used when we ran a course in Victoria down here, and this was my paddock at the time, and then Cole just said, well, why are you going to do that paddock? Do you know, so what we did, we set it up so that I wanted Cole to give me a really hard time so that everyone else felt that they got off lightly. And he said, well, it won't work. And, because this is basically a Phalaris dominant paddock, and it's going to grow in the winter, and I was wanting to put a winter cover crop into it. So it wasn't going to work. And we were trying to use that as a teaching type thing. So, so we can help with that, Ross. And, I'd like to see as a first step that doing the Lucent's going to make money. Otherwise, let's do something else. Do you know, you've already the pump.
What we really, we're already committed to the pump, and the other thing what we were looking at is maybe doing a couple of, so the paddocks, there's actually 4 paddocks that are, so we were thinking about doing trials on the different paddocks of different things to try and get an idea about what was going to be most profitable, and at the same time regenerating the land as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so I guess the main thing that's growing there now is, so there's three of those blocks have all got lucerne mixed with roach grass.
Oh, okay. Yep.
That's what's in them. And then there's one paddock that's been sitting there, farrow, like it's just been sitting there for a couple of years and has just all overgrown with weeds, and has just been let go. And that was the one that I'd just been slashing down, and then ended up it accidentally caught on fire, and we lost, and then burnt all our good stuff that we were wanting to put into the soil.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so yeah, but again, sort of, with your current plan, we need to see the gross profit, and we also need to see the weak links, this weak link analysis of it. So, and you could do that by paddock if you wanted, but like I'd like to see those numbers just so that you know before you go ahead and what you're going to do, and then we can go from there. So, and the lucerne roads grass, if we can manage that properly, like we can actually start to increase landscape function. But that's sort of a key step of getting those. And even if you just wanted to do that, oh no, you've sent them to me before, haven't you? So yeah, so if you can do that and send them to me, the financial weak links, and then your profit target and stuff. So
would you recommend doing one for each? Well, maybe, yeah, one for each enterprise, as in if I tried doing one for roach glass and lucerne, and then tried doing another one for a multi-species cover crop.
Yeah, because you'd need to know before you went into that multi-species, is it going to be profitable? So that paddock that's just got the weeds on it, I'd be just saying, well, what are all our options there? What are the lowest risk, lowest cost options to get that productive? And so you might say, oh, well, the engine's going to be the lucerne roads grass 3 paddocks, but this one paddock here, we're going to try something different and try and make some money out of that. So, yeah, but then, like there's a lot of estimating in this, because you've got to work out just exactly sort of how much hay, and you're going to have to speak to other people that are already doing it and ask them about all their expenses and what issues they have and the maintenance and things like that, so that you've got a really good feel of is it going to be profitable. So, and then it doesn't mean that you don't do it, but it may mean that you start designing, well, what's the next stage for those paddocks? So if you don't have machinery to do no-till and things like that, that changes everything as well. And, we can redesign from there. But it's sort of getting enough options and getting enough numbers that we can start to say, okay, well, that makes sense to do that. So,
yep.
Is that okay, Ross?
Yep.
Very good. Jock, how are you going? You there, Jock?
Audio off. You got me there, Graham?
Yeah, have now.
Yeah. I'm not even keeping up. I'm just a bystander, really. I've missed a couple of your of your sessions and just kind of eavesdropping, really. My planning is about 1.5 years in ahead, so I don't have a property myself, and I'm working towards starting something up in kind of January 2020. So I'm looking at doing hopefully grassland, land grazing and bits and pieces, but I haven't. I'm really early stages, so I don't have numbers and things to put down on paper yet, and I work on a tugboat a fair bit, so I'm just just trying to gather as much as I can, and hopefully I can revisit this when I get time to kind of start finding out some numbers and putting things together. But yeah, so I don't really have have much to it to add, or weak links as such.
Yeah, well, I think a key step would be doing something like that profit target. Do you know, so that you actually know what it is, you know, how much you're going to need, and then I'd start playing around with this. And even if one of the things that I always get a lot of value out is I use someone else's farm as a thinking tool, and what would I do here? So, you know, like, what's the weak link here? What could I do? And start going through that process. So not worrying so much about the numbers, but practicing with this technique. So if I put some effort into which of the links in here, which would get more money out of, so you know what your profit target is, and then starting to think about, well, what's going to be the weak link? Because usually people, when they take over a new property, the weak link is no animals. Do you know? So, but a lot of the time they'll come back that they want to do fencing and water and do all that sort of stuff first. So they actually put the cart before the horse a lot of the time. So when we took over in Vereri, what we had was we'd bought our 60 cows from our previous farm and put them on an area that was sort of 4 times larger. So the only thing we could do was, was increase stock numbers. So we didn't worry about spending money on water and fencing until we had the place stocked. And now we've got enough of this. We were growing more feed than we could eat. So once we could eat it all, then we started growing more by putting fencing and water in. If you know, if that makes sense. So people sort of want to do the regen ahead of the business, if you know what I mean. So
if you're in a more of a brittle environment, do you need to kind of focus on the regen first? I mean, if you're not to get that growth happening.
No, you would actually you would match the stocking rate to the carrying capacity of that property. So whereabouts would it be, Jock, do you think?
Well,
like, where are you?
I'm in Western Australia, so
yeah,
I somewhere between kind of Albany and Esperance.
Okay.
I hope, like a 400 mil kind of rainfall area, and probably something that's been that has been mixed, or hopefully still a mixed farm, but it may be something that's just like a lot of farms here now, but have had the infrastructure previously. So
yeah.
And there's one place.
Sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just saying, there's one place I've been looking at that's a couple thousand acres and has got like small amounts of infrastructure, but I guess it's going to depend on the topography in that as well. I mean, some of the places that probably have the better infrastructure are probably quite have a lot more like undulation and bits and pieces, so that I haven't been fully set up just for croppings. And so I've got a size in mind and a kind of a price range and a like rainfall area, but it's just got to. I'm not really going to pull the trigger for another year and a half. So kind of figure it all out.
So a really good story. I haven't explained this very clearly. Is that Michael and Anna Coughlin? They've got a very profitable, low risk, low cost business. And when they buy the neighbour's farm, or buy another property, what they do is they know that they have to breed up their cows to run on the property, because they know that cows that haven't grown up in a planned grazing system won't go very well. So they start retaining extra heifers and breeding up to stock this property. What they do in the meantime is they stock that property with adjustment cows. So they don't go out and start spending money on it because the link is the middle link. They don't go out, and start doing this, or they may do that very low cost versions of more water, more fencing, but they use adjustment cows set stocked to capture money into the business. And then once they've bred up more of their own numbers, then they start spending the money on the fencing and the water. So, did I say that clearly? Was that okay, Craig?
Yeah,
John?
Yeah, you did. That's something Darren mentioned to me when I spoke to him a few months ago. He mentioned that, the earlier I get somewhere and even be disking in or even seeding, just getting it moving. So whether I just put some oats in, or whether I even contract someone to put some oats in, and then even just borrow someone's stock or adjust some stock just to get things turning over and start working on kind of landscape function before, you can afford it, or, because it's going to probably be a slow process. Like I'll probably be starting from somewhere that isn't ready for it all to happen at once.
Yeah, and see, I'd be immediately jumping into some trials of those multi-species covers, especially if it's sort of got it's coming out of cropping, so they won't have any perenniality. I'd be trying to some of that work that they're doing, with the putting the summer grasses into those areas seems to be going really well, because that gives you the option of doing sort of a summer grass and then a pasture crop. That works much better than a winter grass and a summer pasture crop, unless you've got irrigation. So I'd be really sort of thinking about those things, but initially you'd still be making sure that you could eat what was growing on it, and even if it mightn't be very many, animals, you don't start spending until you've got that right. And one of the things that people are really struggling with is this whole idea of this product conversion link is about having not only the right number, but the right type of animals. So I'm shifting 400 calving cows at the moment, and we'll be heading out there shortly. But they're used to being moved, like they actually all go and get their babies and move the calves with them. Like the whole thing, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of those training. There's some adjustment cows here, and I sent a message to Peter, Peter and Anya, whose farm it is, and they're in Germany on holidays at the moment, saying, the adjustment cows aren't worth it at any money, because so all of the ones that I want move to the next paddock, and the adjustment ones head the other way. So, and they're just cranky pants. It just doesn't work. So,
a bit off topic, Graham, but a question that's been at me a bit is the return of native perennials. Is it you just wait for that, or like you approach people that are harvesting native perennial grass seed, and I hear that, like, following some of Colin's stuff, is that he's harvesting a lot of that type of thing. Does it return, like the people seeding those perennial natives in, or they're just waiting for them to come back depending on the area and bits and pieces?
Yeah, so I think, this is another one that we really need to focus on regeneration. It's too expensive and Col admits it. The seeds, you can get small amounts of those seeds and put them in, but really it's too expensive. So one of the things that we'd sort of, depending where people were, so let's say we're going to put in some summer grasses, we'd look at the African subtropicals that have been, and I can send you information on them, but they've been selected for germination and establishment. The Australian native summer grasses tend to just be a wild population, so they'll germinate when they want to rather than when we want them to. So they're expensive, the germination establishment's variable, so we get people to just put something in and that they can do. That might be one option to do that. We've got those. The other thing is you've got to determine through putting in your little practice areas, what are the thresholds for recovery and animal impact that I need in this environment. So you've actually got to know what they are. So you can't just assume that, and I say you need to know what that is before you do your fencing design. So you know, is it 500 cows a hectare or you know, like, or whatever that is, 50,000 sheep per hectare, or is it 100,000 sheep, or is it, you know, 500 or 1,000 cows per hectare? What is the threshold that actually allows me to regenerate the soil seed bank? So it's that impact that actually germinates the seeds. So it's one of those things that you really need to be doing the work. And people sort of, there's no simple answer because it changes. That those thresholds for recovery and animal impact actually change by property and change by season. So there's no other thing. But yeah, so we typically go for regeneration and look at the roadsides, what's on the roadside. Okay, I know that if it's on the roadside, there's a fair chance that there's a viable soil seed bank in here, and we do that and do it. One area that you don't do anything, that you're just looking at the viable soil seed bank and going to germinate and establish that. We do another one, you know, where you're putting in, say, the African subtropicals, and then you might get a small sample. So on our place, when I broadcast in southern Victoria, if I broadcast the African subtropicals, I never see them. If I broadcast warrego grass seed from coal, then it'll establish and start coming back into the community. So I think that's pretty interesting. Sort of, they've actually selected those seeds to go through a drill, not to be broadcast. Yeah, so it's that sort of thing, but we can always help with that, John. That's no problem. So,
cool. Thank you.
Very good. How's that going? How are you going, Celia? Moving around, gone, put on 3-4 coats.
Help us with the fire too. Yeah. Yeah. It's.
Is there any more questions from anyone, or?
No, it's a lot of food for thought, Graham, as far as myself diversifying. And actually being real about what the income is, the profit is.
Yeah.
Rather than just wishful thinking.
Yeah, and it's hard work, I know. So I do it myself. So the next one we'll be talking about, you know, putting that together onto a plan, but we'll basically be running through so that people can, so we can go back, we can loop back. So if you wanted to go back and loop back on that sort of doing those gross profits and a new enterprise and what the weak linking is it. So, and yeah, so that'll be next week. So I just wanted to sort of, and I really wanted to make sure that people were aware of the risk of having machinery. So if we want to increase, or if we want to select a new enterprise or modify a current enterprise, it's got to have incredibly low costs and incredibly low risk, because when you study agriculture, it's the expenses to run it and it's the risk that's destroying it. So, and this is a classic case. I was trying not to. It's socially unacceptable to sort of like say, well, we've got grass here now on this farm in an area that's got drought. It's like as if you're rubbing people's noses in it. So I've been really sort of trying to keep my head down, and then they blame you as if it's a fault. They go, oh yeah, but he's always been understocked, and I go. And I have to bite my tongue to say yes, and he always makes money. You know, like, so is it understocked or is it the right stocking rate? because you're not making money. So what's the evidence that where you are? But so just some of those things, that overcapitalizing and plant machinery increases the cost of production, increases risk and lowers the rate of the business growth. We need to eat as much grass as possible. Grass eaten and harvested by animals is 4 to 5 times cheaper than harvesting it and then feeding it back to them. Maximum profits at 80% of maximum production due to diminishing returns. Everyone's pushing it over the top. They're going over the maximums and then reducing their profitability. And grazing enterprises are most profitable when stocking rate is below the carrying capacity. And that's really what this is showing here, is that the land's continuing to improve in a drought, the profits continuing to grow, they're going to make money, the animals are healthy, and there's no downside to being understocked. Like, it's just weird. It's sort of like a worrying of that if the price, like I've been working with dairy farmers and they go, I've got to carry this many cows because if the milk price goes up next year, I'll make more money next year. And I go, well, let's just focus on making money this year, because you're so overstocked. When I do the numbers, the milk price is going to have to double for you next year for you to make a profit next year. And that's unlikely to happen. So is that okay? Is that clear, sort of, what I'm trying to say? This is a bit about slow and steady wins the race, and making sure that you never run out of feed. If you run out of feed, then someone else has got you by the options and they tend to squeeze, I say. So, so we'll be looking at that, using that variance to budget, but mainly focusing on the structured monthly meeting to determine the corrective action and putting the profit plan back on track. So that's next week. So once you've got a plan, how do you keep it on track is really the key to achieving that profit at the end of the year. So, sorry, Ross?
I was just wanting to clarify something that you were just saying there about the overstocking. Like most places are overstocked, but Alan Savory often says that most places are understocked. Or is that just, is he basically just saying understocked as in they just undergraze areas, and that you need to, as a whole, as a whole farm, you would normally be less stocked and just intensively graze them in smaller places? Is that what you're meaning?
It's very contentious, Ross, so I don't want Alan to cross me off his Christmas card list. But I think if there's two types of environment, Ross, there's sort of the high rainfall zone, where if there wasn't a grass there, we planted it, or more intensive agriculture. So in those areas, we actually probably need to back off on the stocking rate. So we carry about 2/3 of our district stocking rate, and we make more money in our environment. And then we use electric fencing infrastructure to get the animal impact that Alan's talking about. So that's that sort of. In the more western areas, so western New South Wales, more those arid areas, I've got a lot of experience around Cobar, that 10-inch or 400 mil rainfall with really, really big paddocks. There's a grass plant, a perennial grass plant about every kilometre. So if you put a grass plant every 500 metres, you double the stocking rate. There's actually a flip here between your high rainfall zone and your more arid. So I say to people, if you're in those more arid areas, put in some of that infrastructure, start to get some stock density. As the landscape function improves, now put your stock in. But I don't put stock in ahead of improving the landscape function, because if you're already at the carrying capacity of the land, I really struggle to make it work, especially in the high rainfall zone. So I think we've got to talk about which environment we're working in, about whether you increase that stocking rate, or you might have to back off on the stocking rate. So we're overstocked in southern areas and they're understocked in those western areas. So does that make sense, Ross?
Yep.
Yeah. So the problem is if the mobs are too small, you need quite a lot of electric fencing infrastructure to get over those thresholds that you need, that animal impact that you need to regenerate the land. So yeah, so you need a fair size mob, and otherwise you need a lot of fencing. But like on your irrigation sort of thing, you'd have to be having temporary temporary fencing so that you could actually get that that look of that out of that Gabe Brown PowerPoint. So that's not the way Alan does it. And I'm thinking he's only thinking about those more arity, brittle environments and not thinking about the high rainfall zone. When I first went to be trained in America, and I said to Alan I was living in a high rainfall Mediterranean environment, he spent extra time with me because he wasn't interested in those type of environments. They give him claustrophobia. So he wants to be out sort of in the big country, sort of not in our southern Victorian Tasmanian country. So he spent extra time. So, and that's what I've been working on since '96 is, well, what are the steps to make this successful? And I find that if people are just starting and they're just stocking, we start sort of at about half to 2/3 of the district stocking rate. So we carry, the unit we use down here is the average is about 15 DSC a hectare of, so 15 dry sheep per hectare. And if I start people at 7 to 10, that usually works, and they get to see what's happening and they get feedback so that they actually can learn from it and get that intuitive expertise. So I can do that, and then I give them simple techniques of what's the definition of a perennial grass when it's recovered. So put them in when the perennial grass looks like an ungrazed plant and contains fresh litter, and take them off on the gut fill and the dung scores. So look at the grass to put them in, look at the animal to take them out. And if I do that with people that have got no experience whatsoever, it works from day one. I do that laneway design, that works, and then we start really heavily selecting for animals that like to be managed for that. It works, it's easy pie. But if you start with a lot of the other noise and information and stuff like that, I don't even want to mention some of it because it's so sticky. People can't forget it for the rest of their lives. But one of the things that also is different in a Mediterranean environment is, Alan will say, fast growth, fast moves. Ross, have you heard him say that or read that?
I think, yes, I have, yeah.
Yeah, and that works where spring is at the start of the growing season in a summer growing area, and it fails where spring is at the end of the growing season in a winter growing area. But that's not in the book. That's only because Alan's not interested in Mediterranean and high rainfall zone.
So what would you call, so you've been up here, what would you call Rockhampton area, as in what sort of zone?
Well, yeah, so it's a summer growing grass, perennial grass areas, predominantly summer grasses. And so spring's at the start of the growing season. And you may be able to make fast growth, fast moves work. But it was what Alan was saying is if you only had a very small number of paddocks and you got really good growing conditions, so the temperature was good, and your boots are wet. Do you know, so it's got to be the boots are still wet. So for 3 or 4 days, when that growth is incredibly fast, it may be of value to do fast growth, fast moves. What people have taken, so it's like a microburst of fast growth, fast moves. Whereas what people have taken is for down here is for the whole of spring. They're pretending that it's fast growth, and it's not. It's only when those conditions are really lining up, when all the planets line up, and also when you don't have many paddocks. When you've got a lot of paddocks, it's just irrelevant. You ignore it completely. So I don't even mention it to the the small tree changer types and things like that, and it works like a dream. If they don't think about it, they can't get it wrong. But yeah, so we set people up with a very constrained growing planned grazing system so that they can learn, and then once they've learnt and they've got that expertise, then they can start to fiddle with it a bit. But the key thing is that if you run out of grass, like the majority of people have in New South Wales now, I'm saying the recoveries aren't long enough. So the recovery isn't just for the soil and for the land, it's for the season and the business. So you lower the risk. If the longer the recovery, the lower the risk, because you've got that much feed in front of you, and you've also got more chance of lining up a rainfall event with a temperature event to grow grass so that you don't run out of grass. Sorry.
Yep.
Bit of a tirade. I get a bit frustrated with the whole thing. So people are trying to optimize the time that the grass is recovered rather than look at the risk and the business. So and the damage it does when it stops raining. So any other comments or questions?
No, that's good. That answered a lot of my questions. Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that anytime too, Ross. If you have anything pop up, just bang us an email, and yeah, because I've written an article for the Stipend newsletter, and I'm not sure I'm even going to put it in because it's going to go off like a bomb. Because there's a lot of people out there not talking about the whole package. So they're not taking a holistic view of the holistic grazing. So it's got to be the risk, it's got to be the season, it's got to be the people, yeah, it's got to be the land. And they're sort of trying to work out how they can sell their course by telling people they can increase their stocking rate, which is a bit like, I always say it's like heroin. The first shot's free, but then you're in trouble for the rest of your life if you listen to that stuff. So it might be a bit dramatic. Okay, well, if there's no more comments or thoughts or questions, I might sort of end the meeting if that works for people. So thanks for your time, and I'll be back on next Thursday, and we can go from there. So if we can get some of that work done, and if you want to send it to me or send me a photograph of it or whatever works for you, and I'm happy to go through next week as well. So thanks for your time, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Graham.
Really. Thanks a lot, Graham.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Graham.
Jock, see you, Ross. See you later. Bye.
Bye.